To a regularly scheduled meeting of the Waterville City Council. If anybody would like an agenda, I believe they are on the stool right outside the door. Before we get started, I will ask Chris Rancourt in the front row to please stand and lead us in the pledge. I'm going to hand this over to Councillor Mayhew for a moment.
Yeah, I would like to have a moment of silence for the city of Farmington and the horrible tragedy that has happened out there with the loss of a captain and many, many injured firefighters, first responders, and it's just a telltale story of how absolute dangerous these types of things are. So can we take a moment of silence? Thank you.
First up, we have the disclosure of the conflict of interest. Is there any councillor who feels they have a conflict of interest, any votes they will take tonight? Seeing none, approval of the consent agenda. Can I get a motion for the approval of the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? There is no unfinished business, so we will move on to new business, starting with Resolution 148, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for issuance of a special amusement permit to F&B LLC doing business as The Elm.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Resolution 149, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for renewal of a special amusement license to Cancun LLC doing business as Cancun Mexican Restaurant.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Resolution 150, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for authorizing renewal of a special amusement license to VSW Forrest J. Pear, Post 1285, doing business as VFW Forrest J. Pear, Post 1285.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? No. All in favor? Resolution 151, 2019.
A resolution providing for authorizing a regular municipal election to be held on November 5, 2019. Be it resolved by City Council of the City of Waterville acting as municipal officers as follows, that the City Council hereby authorize a regular municipal election to be held on November 5, 2019 for the following positions: 3-year terms, Ward 3 City Council and Board of Education, Ward 5 City Council and Board of Education, and citywide Kennebec Water District Trustees, 2 seats.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Moving right along, Resolution 152, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for authorizing a special municipal election to be held on November 5, 2019.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. Yes.
Patty, can you just read the positions?
Yes. Ward 2 City Councilor, a 1-year term. Ward 6 City Councilor, 1-year term. Ward 2 Board of Education, 1-year term. Referendum question to form a charter commission for all wards, and election of charter commission members for all wards.
Discussion? All in favor? Resolution 153, 2019.
A resolution providing for establishing hours for voter registration. Whereas Title 21A, Maine Revised Statutes Annotated, Section 122.6 and 122.8 requires special evening hours for voter registration for 2 hours in the evening, beginning between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. on at least one of the 5 business days before an election, unless the municipal officers establish different hours. And be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as a municipal officers as follows, that the City Council hereby establish voter registration hours to be Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. with no special evening hours.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Resolution 154, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for appointment of a committee to study fire department services.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion?
I have some. For some that don't know, what we'll be looking at is a lot of the services that the fire department currently already has, but one that we're really interested in is to see if it's financially viable and worth it to us to have our own ambulatory service, transport service from the fire department. Currently, we don't do that. We're one of the only municipalities our size that don't. I think the 15 above us and the 15 below us absolutely do. There's a couple in there. Okay. Councilor Morris and I got an opportunity to sit down with the chief last week. We saw an ambulance that came from Albion and the benefits it's had for their community. So it's something I'm pretty excited about.
Something you've been talking about for a long time?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it doesn't make financial sense, we're not going to do it.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Resolution 155, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for approval of memorandum of agreement with Federal Aviation Agency.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? Do you have something to say, Mike?
Right. The equipment that we have at the airport that's navigational related, the lights and the other navigational things, even the weather system, is property of the FAA. And in the past, that has always been maintained through lease agreements between the city and FAA. They've changed the way they want to do lease, so now they want to do it through a memorandum of understanding. It's nothing more than just a different form that they want to use. The good news with that equipment is it's purchased by them, paid for by the Federal Aviation Agency, and maintained by them. And so it's very important equipment.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Thank you.
Resolution 156, 2019.
A resolution providing for adoption of a new fee schedule for dispatch services. Be it resolved by the Waterville City Council, acting as the municipal officers, that the attached fee schedule be adopted for all dispatch communities beginning on January 1, 2020, except for Winslow and Oakland. The contracts with Winslow and Oakland will begin on July 1, 2020.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until the next regularly scheduled city council meeting. Some of the towns that we provide services for have just seen this document recently, and so we'd like to give them some time to react to it and make counter proposals before we vote on anything.
Second.
All in favor of the table?
Thank you.
All right, we'll
Yep.
see that next time.
We reached out to all of them, but they didn't really have quite enough time, having gotten this late last week. So we've agreed to go out and talk to their selectmen if necessary, so that it's not a surprise when it happens.
Resolution 157, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for bid award for a fire department tower truck.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Resolution 158, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for bid award for fire station floor resurfacing.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? For anyone in the audience, and there's a lot of people here tonight, these are items that were previously approved as when the city council approved the bond that we just took to market, and that bond has been sold, and so now we are giving approval to the items that they have bid on for that. Next is Resolution 159, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
And second.
All in favor?
A resolution providing for bid award for fire station masonry repairs.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Any discussion? Counselor?
I see here, Chief, that we had a bid for $16,200, but we're looking to spend $40,900.
Just give him your mic.
I think it is, but
You have help on the way, Chief.
So my recommendation is we reject that bid. We did receive a bid for $16,000 and change from Larson Masonry, which is one of our local contractors, which is what I would have preferred to use, obviously. But they did not meet the scope of the work. I brought Captain Grobeck here so he can answer the fine details if you have that. He's the resident expert. He's our building maintenance overseer. He does a very, very good job, and I'd rather have him answer the question.
Thank you.
So when, the day we open the bids, I obviously gonna vet out the numbers, and I called Alan in and said, what did you bid? Originally, I had asked him to come in 3 or 4 weeks prior, said, give me an idea of, what you can do, and give me a budget to work with. So he did, and then when we had the roof repair guy come in, he looked at the parapet as well, and further recommended that it get brought all the way down to the roof line and back up. I sent via email the invitation to bid to Larson. He never read it. So he bid it based on what he was thinking we wanted or what we had talked about. I tried to reiterate back when I sent it, hey, this has changed, take a look at it. Well, he never did. So he was just gonna tear off the backside, replace it with block. We wouldn't have got that complete seal down to the roof line like the independent roof services had recommended. So unfortunately, he wasn't bidding with what we put out for a spec.
Any other questions or discussion? Yep.
So the damage that was caused on the roof, it's mostly cracks, right? That's based on the picture. It looks like there were a lot of cracks. There was there's a hole.
Yep.
So it's a flat roof, right? So I had somebody ask me today, have we thought about getting a triangle roof? Because obviously accumulation of snow, will create some issues with the integrity of the roof and also the walls, because I saw some cracks on the walls also.
Yeah, the short answer is no, we haven't thought of that. The station was originally designed and engineered to be a flat roof. I think that the repairs that we're proposing would be much less than the cost of going to a triangle roof. The biggest issue is our station is very old. It was built in, correct me if I'm wrong, 1911, and it has been in complete disrepair. And quite honestly, we just haven't had the funds to properly maintain it. I have to be honest with you. And that's why we contacted Independent Roof Services. They came in, did a very comprehensive review, which is why we included it in the council packet, so that you could see that everything that I'm up here asking for or discussing is legit concerns that is not opinion-based. It's factual and researched, and that should hold some credibility there. And then unfortunately, when we went out to bid for these projects, contractors are hard to come by right now. Everybody is doing construction. So these jobs are bidding very high, and it is very difficult to get contractors in a timely manner. So looking at the bid specification that we put out, taking the parapet wall from standing height down to roof line, the other than Larson's, met the provisions of the spec. However, we're asking for lowest bid.
No, we're not disputing the validity of what's needed. Again, it was just a question that was brought up, just looking long-term, because obviously we're going to repair the roof. I don't think we're replacing it completely. And so because it's an older building, we're bound to see some more damage down the road that we will need more money to replace, right? So somebody brought up, with where we live and the amount of snow that we see, depending on the winter, going on a triangle roof, because I think the person next door to you guys actually went to a triangle roof because he had the same kind of roof structure, and finally decided that, he was going to do that. So I know it's something that we thought about, but.
Yeah, the answer is no, we haven't thought of that.
Okay.
I called in the experts to take a look at the roof. If they would have felt that a triangle roof would have been applicable or the best for that roof line, I'm sure they would have recommended it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the council? Public? We'll take a vote. All in favor?
There you go.
That was 158, wasn't it?
That was 159.
All right, we're farther than I thought. Ordinance 160, 2019.
An ordinance providing for amendment to the licenses and permits ordinance, Appendix A, license and permit fee schedule. Be it enacted by the City Council of the City of Waterville, acting as municipal officers, as follows: that the City Council hereby authorize an amendment to Appendix A, license and permit fee schedule to establish a 6-month mobile food vendor license with a fee of $200.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Questions or discussion from the council? From the public? All in favor? Moving on.
We established a new one. It was,
Ready?
I'm sorry.
It's all right. No apology necessary. Order 161, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An order providing for approval of forfeiture.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Order 162, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
Whoops. An order providing for acceptance of a 2018 FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant.
Move to adopt.
And second.
Chief, I see you're ready to go
Yeah.
to tell us about this.
I have some very quick discussion. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that everybody understands that my staff is about the best in the business, okay? There's no question they do very, very hard work every day, and obtaining grants is one of them. So the grant in question is to replace air packs. Now, this air pack is just like a backpack. It goes on a firefighter's back, and essentially it allows them to take fresh air into an environment. So these packs that you see here are in pretty good shape, actually, but they're 20 years old. So we'd like to replace them. We're asking for $11,000 and change out of the capital improvement reserve account to represent the 5% grant match.
Okay. Mike?
The Capital Improvement Reserve Fund was established quite a few years ago by the city council when the city sold foreclosed properties in certain parts of town. That sale revenue went into this fund so that if there were emergency repairs that were needed during the course of the year in any city building, library, city hall, police, fire, or equipment purchases that happened unplanned, we didn't have a budget for it, then that Capital Improvement Reserve Fund was set up for that purpose. This certainly meets that purpose. Present time, we have about $60,000 in that Capital Improvement Reserve Fund.
Okay. Phil?
I just want to say, that is definitely something we commend the chief for all the work that he's done. And I know that everybody on the council, is unanimous in doing whatever is necessary to provide them with the best equipment that they can possibly have, because they do a fantastic job keeping us safe, and we want to make sure that we take care of them as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? All in favor? And we are at ordinance 163, 2019.
Move to read by title only.
Second.
All in favor?
An ordinance providing for amendment to zoning.
Move to adopt.
Second?
I will open it for discussion on the council.
Anybody else first? 'Cause I got some words.
Councillor Mayhew.
So some words of kind of a lot of different things here. This sort of has become a little bit of a contentious issue, obviously, from the planning board meeting onward, and being a close vote of a 4-3 margin. I can tell you as the Ward 4 councilor, this being in my ward, I have heard nothing but a no on this. They do not want to have this specific zoning changed in accordance with how they feel generally as my constituency. I'm also going back to Commercial A as the zone in the marijuana ordinance. There's the only zone that is excluded for any kind of recreational retail. This is something that we crafted as a committee. This is something that we put a lot of thought and analysis in, and I commend the marijuana committee for very varied amounts of opinion when it came to studying what the state law was ever evolving, still is evolving. And I want to be the first one to say that I am a marijuana advocate. I wouldn't be on the committee if I wasn't. I do believe in the revenue and the business entrepreneurship of this business. It's ever evolving. There's ever changes coming as far as regulations. But we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there are rules and regulations and parameters that we all have to observe. And sometimes this is really, in my opinion, the first test to our newly created municipal marijuana ordinance. I do believe, and I'll cite some varying reasons, you know, there's been a lot of people that have talked to me and email and on the streets through, they are concerned about the optics of having this kind of establishment as the gateway to Waterville coming off I-95. Now, there are varying opinions to that, and I understand both sides. I understand that this was a Commercial C property at one time before Pinecone decided was going to put an addition onto this building. It went before the planning board, and it was passed to make it Commercial A to accommodate that. A lot of people on each side, a lot of counselors have very good, legitimate opinions. So I want to first and foremost say that I'm amicable to everybody that has an opinion on this. It is something to take into consideration. I take into consideration that so far I have gotten a overwhelmingly negative response from my ward. The ordinance defines the 500-foot barrier where retail marijuana store cannot be within 500 feet of an educational facility or a religious facility. This does, in essence, as of now, as written, without partitioning or subdividing the property, violate that 500-foot contingency regulation with the Church of Latter-day Saints on Washington Avenue. So that has been defined, that has been found by Dan Bradstreet, our code enforcement officer. I made a call and had some consultations with him, and as it is now, it does violate that ordinance. This could be the basis of some of the debate that happened on the planning board and the basis of what we are going to have through these two readings. This is not the final reading of this. This is the first. So there's plenty of time to everybody to have their thoughts gathered and put together on this. But in my opinion, this is not only the commercial A that we have limited through the marijuana ordinance and the committee that has agreed to that, every other zone in the city of Waterville is open to retail marijuana. And we have made that so we could make it a viable option of revenue and for entrepreneurship. And I want to make sure that is well defined as the city of Waterville, and that was our intent. Commercial A is the only zone that we debated back and forth. Primarily, the downtown encompasses most of commercial A. There are a few parcels of land that are under commercial A, but they are scattered, and most of them are insignificant. This happens to be, obviously, a talked-about significant parcel. And I think most of that debate can be centered around the marijuana ordinance as it is written newly, and around the fact that it is at the gateway of part of our city. And there are varying opinions. And like I said, I am amicable to all of them. But in my personal and from a principal aspect, I am obviously in favor of not rezoning this based on those things that I have just said. And with that, I will turn it over.
Councilor Coelho.
And I just don't want to speak out of turn, but I feel like we've
Make sure
already-
you're speaking
I'm
so
sorry.
that the
I
people
feel like
can-
we've already established sort of that the marijuana ordinance and the zoning are two separate issues for this specific building.
I would merely suggest that there are varying opinions on that, and we should be, and we will be respectful to all.
So I have something because I wanted to, I mean, I sat there thinking about this, so I'll read it. Last week, our planning board sat in this very room tasked with evaluating whether or not a building on KMD should be rezoned back to its original designation of Commercial C. The board was divided 4-3, choosing not to recommend a zoning change. They have no obligation to say yes, even when, on the surface, it appeared painfully obvious that the building in question fit the criteria for such a zone change. Instead of evaluating the property, in my opinion, some board members chose to use personal ideology not to recommend a change. And although I don't agree with them, I want citizens to pay attention. We often get accused as city officials of being corrupt, that we do these backroom deals that benefit us and not the residents of this great city. Yet some of these same voices have the nerve to sit on our city boards, paid for by our tax dollars, and blatantly show their true colors. In a world I live in, that's called hypocrisy. Now, I don't fault the members for having personal feelings on the matter. After all, we are all just humans making decisions that affect other humans. It's not a perfect science. But I ask going forward that we not fall victim to emotional responses, but instead use a little logic and common sense to get the job done. I hope that the rest of the members of this council will do what's right and evaluate this zoning change on the merits and not based on what may or may not open there. Done.
I just want to have a couple comments here. One of the issues that has clearly been highlighted here is the way city planning works, is that you determine what you want your city to look like, where you want the various businesses to go, where you want the residential areas, and then you zone accordingly. It does get a little bit more complicated, over 100 years later, because now you have all these zones that are set. But the reality is, right now, one of the major weaknesses that the city of Waterville has, that has been highlighted by this case, is a lack of proactive city planning and having these big discussions, especially on new businesses like this. I had lunch with Councilor Thomas today, and this is something that we talked about, and I think you'll see an agenda item in the near future, asking the council to direct the planning board to start delving into some of these greater planning issues so that it makes it a little bit easier, because the reality is I don't fault anybody on the planning board for the votes. They had a right to take the votes they had, whether they voted for it or against it. I talked to different planning board members on both sides, and frankly, I appointed every one of them, so I respect all of them and their ability to have a difference of opinion. You know, but one of the questions that I have that I don't think really can be answered here, this is just food for thought as we move forward with the planning, regardless of what happens to this particular zone. There's an argument to be made that I understand that this zone used to be Commercial C. It was actually the owners of it that requested it to go to Commercial A, so they're merely asking it to be changed back. The question that I've heard from a lot of constituents is, if you change one, is the city council going to be approving future zone changes to essentially skirt the ordinance? So then someone else comes that has another lot that wants to, because we do that a lot. We do that a lot. And again, I think that goes back to that, the city planning, and hopefully we can move forward as a city and tackle that issue, because it's going to continue to be a bigger issue if you look at KMD, you look at Silver Street, where there's this constant back and forth pull between residential, commercial, what kind of commercial. Hopefully these are discussions we can have going forward. Thanks. Counselor.
I think I'm the only one here who actually served on the planning board before. I mean, this is a cautionary tale, I think, because I think there's been a failing. There's people who talk about being business friendly, and we'll have somebody come forward who buys a parcel and then wants the city to rezone it so that they can do what they want with it. And there's almost a feeling like the city's just a rubber stamp for these things, that we're supposed to honor every one of these requests. Well, that does go against the nature of zoning. And so I think people have to understand, just because you ask to have something rezoned does not mean that we are required to do it. And I also want to say that when you ask for your parcel to be rezoned, you have to think about what all the consequences of that are. You know, because while that's the whole point of changing the zone, is there's advantages and disadvantages to each one. And in this case, I dealt with this before on the planning board. There's a lot of parcels on KMD that are, if they're in the Commercial C zone, they're so small that the setback requirements don't allow people to actually build anything else on their lot. So they're kind of stuck with what they have as it is. And over the years, we made accommodations for people so that they could do something with their lot, when really probably what we should have done is stuck to our guns, because ultimately what we need is for some of these lots, these smaller lots, to become single lots. So that they fit within the Commercial C zone on KMD. I mean, anyone who's driven down KMD knows there's way too many curb cuts on KMD. There's too much traffic coming in and out. It really, I think, long-term is a place for much larger commercial parcels, and not, the idea of CA is downtown. That's so the buildings can be built right up next to each other. And I think, certainly in my mind, we went through this not only with the marijuana ordinance, but with the adult entertainment ordinance, which we also didn't want in the Commercial A zone. And the idea really was that you're just a little too close to your neighbors downtown. At least if you're out in the Commercial C zone in different parts of the city, there's a little bit of a buffer. You've got your own parking lot, you got your own building, you're a little bit more of a contained operation. Now, when I was on the planning board, if I was looking at an issue like this, what I would look at is not necessarily what is the proposed use of the property, but does the proposed zoning change fit with what happens in the surrounding zones? And pretty much everything that surrounds this parcel is Commercial C. And so anyone that's concerned about the optics potentially of a marijuana store right off the highway, well, you have to be concerned about every other lot, because they could do it on any other lot that surrounds this already. And I do think that they really are separate issues, and the issue of whether it's 500 feet from the church or not is a separate discussion. The only real consideration for me is, does the proposed zoning change make sense in the larger picture of the zoning? And I think it would be hard to make an argument that going back to Commercial C in an area where everything that surrounds it is Commercial C, that fits with what's being used there. So I'll be supporting the zoning change this evening.
And just to be clear, as a point of clarification, the 500-foot rule is not a rule about the zone. It's a rule about whether they're going to get a permit under the marijuana ordinance or not. Because there's a case to the permit would be denied necessarily based on that restriction within the ordinance. Counselor.
Yeah, there's definitely, a complex issue that we have here, but also I believe it's a simple one, because just looking at the facts and the information that we have, and from everything I just heard, especially that even if the zone were to change, they might not get that permit based on code enforcement. If we separate the two issues, Councilor Thomas mentioned, it's pretty difficult to make an argument against rezoning the parcel. I mean, we're not talking about it. We're not talking about, what kind of business could go there. We're strictly looking at, okay, this parcel, would that make sense for us to do that, right? To rezone it so that it can meet the criteria of the surrounding parcels around it. And based on what I'm hearing, I haven't heard anything that would suggest to me so far that, rezoning this particular parcel would not fit, what is actually happening there at this very moment.
Anybody else from the council?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke with a lot of planning board members and got their understanding as to why they voted the way they did, and really just come at it from their perspective. And I certainly respect all of the thought and the thought process that went through during the meeting. And the one thing that I kept going back is to everything else around it is the C. It was a C before. Regardless of what you put there, it just makes sense. So at this point, that's kind of where I'm leaning.
Of course you can.
I just want to echo
You are a counselor,
everything that everyone else has said. It does just make sense to go back to the rezoning of C. Yeah. Other than that.
Is there any further comments or questions from the council? I would like to open it up to the public. I know there's people here who would like to comment on this. So we ask you to keep your comments within several minutes. Come up, say your name, tell us where you live, and what you have to say.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, Chris Rancourt, Planning
Good
Board. I also agree that the zoning, because of around it, could easily be changed to C. The reason I particularly voted no was, as a planning board member, Mr. Mayor, you can answer this question, I may be wrong. We are required to also take into consideration the ordinances for parking or any other thing. That's why these ordinances are in place. They're rules.
Yeah, you do take your direction from the city council, so I think that's a perfectly legitimate stance to take. It is a planning board, not a rezoning board.
And in this particular, well, I guess I was asked the question of, what if it wasn't marijuana? Would you have approved it? Well, I would have asked what business is going in there. Why do you want to change this commercial zoning? And if they said, well, we're not sure, my answer would have been, well, I'm not going to approve it because we're doing no service to the community without knowing why you want this zoning change and what you'd like to put there. Like, it doesn't matter if it has nothing to do with marijuana, but fact knowing it was, the ordinance is there and states that commercial A zoning, it's not allowed. That ordinance was placed in April of this year, was it?
I think that's correct, yeah.
And that was voted on by the city council?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that is why I voted no on it, because it was a regulation saying that this current board did not want in commercial A. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from the public?
Good evening. My name is Jewel Curry. My husband and I are owners of the Pinecone, which is the 475 Kennedy Drive building that's in question tonight. And I would like to make a comment about what this gentleman just said about the property. Based on the way you have written your article, or whatever you call it, it was not written the way the state wrote it. You wrote it in your own analysis of what you were looking at. However, if the church had 10 acres behind it, I would still be, because it goes from point to point, I would still be too close. We are 25 feet off, and by taking 50 feet off the back, which was actually a second parcel originally, so I would just be also putting that parcel back to its original state, I would still be in compliance. Not to tell you how to do your job, but you might want to look at in future, the way it is written, if you went building to building, I'm probably 800 feet, maybe even 1,000 feet away from the church. However, the way it's written, it goes from the point of the back of the property, doesn't go from the church to my store. So it's not really reflecting a true opinion of the distance. And I also don't understand, and I realize they're grandfathered, but I know there's a CBD place right across the street from a school, and that's okay. And that doesn't make any sense to me. We're talking a children's elementary school, but you guys are having a hard time with my place possibly putting in a cannabis store, which is on a highway, which is actually all commercial C except for our store. And it sounds to me like this is all a bias against cannabis. And I feel like we are being, and we are being singled out for biases. And laws aren't about biases. Laws are about if it's okay for this person, it's okay for that person. And you had no problem approving a marijuana plant off KMD on the airport road that you sold your city land to. That was fine. But it's all about perception because people are going to get off the highway and they're going to see a marijuana store. It's not a strip club, people. And right directly behind it is Joker's. Joker's is a, what do you call it, beverage, alcohol. Before that, it was Hasford's, and it was an off-track betting and bar. That was fine. You had no problem with that. So I kind of feel like this is an archaic look at things. Marijuana is an acceptable part of our culture now. It's going to become more and more so. It's going to have less of a stigmatism to it. I know that Walmart and Target are both going to be carrying CBD oil in their stores, and it's going to be as commonplace as a bar. And if you're business friendly and you're looking to grow your revenue, this is a good business. These people know what they're doing. They have several other businesses just like it, and it's not a fly-by-night. It's not going to be a unclassy kind of place. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to be a dive. It's just going to be a business. And if we're business friendly, let's look at that, please. Thank you.
Wtvl Ward 7. I also was a voting member of the Marijuana Ordinance Committee that met this past winter. One of my objections in the committee was going from property line to property line. That just didn't make any sense to me. It should be the common way of travel. And I used an example yesterday doing a podcast that if somebody opened up and it was allowed where Payless is, and you have New Beginnings on Upper Main Street, the property line is not within. I'm sorry, it is within the 500 feet. But that person would have to cross, number one, down an embankment, up an embankment, cross 4 lanes of Interstate 95, a median strip, 2 breakdown lanes, and go across the field because he does not meet the criteria of being 500 feet from property line to property line. It is 500 feet if he were to open up, let's say where Payless is, go down Waterville Commons to Upper Main, go left on Upper Main, underneath the overpass, continue a little bit ways, and turn left onto New Beginnings. It just doesn't make sense. It's common sense, folks. One other comment that I'd like to make. Waterville has the best sign ordinance in the state by far. We voted very specifically on the ordinance committee for marijuana, cannabis, that signage is not going to have the flying ginja, you're not going to have the big green leaf, you're not going to have marijuana sold here, blinking lights, yada, yada, yada. These guys do it right. And like Mrs. Curry said, right across from where youth football plays, next to the George Mitchell School, you have a shop right across the street. So I'm in favor of rezoning CA back to CC. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to keep this to the zoning discussion. So I would ask that, we're going to have a marijuana discussion after this. I would ask that we talk about zoning and city planning, which may include marijuana, but within that context. Thank you.
Hi, Jennifer Bergeron. I was on the committee that put forward the ordinance for marijuana. And my answer to the rezoning of this parcel is that we never said the zoning in the city had to stay frozen in time. So the fact that that building is CA versus commercial C doesn't mean if it fits the criteria for commercial C that it shouldn't be turned back into commercial C. And if you look at the map, everything is purple on the map, which is commercial C. That one little square rectangle is pink, and it is in a sea of purple. So if we had any building adjoining that, you're going to have the ability for those to become a marijuana facility. So, if you're worried about people getting off of 95 and not seeing this great town of Waterville, then, what do you have? You have Martin's, you have an empty lot, you have a rundown, I don't know who owns that hotel, so I don't want to.
There is $2 million going into that right now, and it is going to be reopened. Mr. Patel owns that.
Okay, well,
if you look outside now, there's lots and lots of pallets of things about to go inside.
I rethought that. But you don't have the most beautiful area of town anyway, and every single other parcel that's there could house this business. So zoning, my opinion is, when we spoke about this, we didn't mean for the zoning in the entire city of Waterville to freeze. That means that the decision can be made to rezone something if it fits the criteria. And you're concerned about people coming in and completely saying, oh, turn this parcel in. We want to put a pot shop here. We want to, if that's the concern, then answer each one on its basis.
Right. My point of bringing that up is that it is a legitimate planning question for planning board members to want to know what it's being used for, because otherwise there's a lot of lots that we may not, as a city in planning, outside of this one, not want to flip into different zones for various reasons.
But every other parcel could be used for that purpose. So I think it is definitely, speaking to cannabis specifically, when you reject rezoning that piece. So I think that goes against what my opinion on that committee was. I'm only one of the people that was on that committee, but for sure that was not my intention to just say nothing can ever change in this city, no zoning can ever change, and the places that can be cannabis friendly, that's it. What we've chosen right now is it. So that's not how I intended it anyway.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. Anybody else before we take a vote? Julian?
I just have two quick questions for the council. if this is approved and down the road a church is approved to be within 300 feet, does the marijuana shop close after that?
No, that would be grandfathered.
Grandfathered, okay. The one issue that I am not certain of, if it reverts to a Zone C, would that business qualify to be a marijuana shop under the present marijuana laws with the church? That's something I think the community needs to know.
I think it would not qualify for a permit as it is parceled out now. I think what we heard, just to be accurate, and you can shake your head yes if I'm wrong, is that there's a conversation about parceling off a piece of the lot that apparently used to be a separate parcel,
Okay.
which then would create the proper distance between this parcel.
So as it stands now, without parceling off, it would not qualify, even though it was zoned for for C.
As it stands now, that is correct. It wouldn't
Okay.
it would not qualify for the permit.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy Weeks, member of the Planning Board. I would just like to make a couple of comments, especially with what Jay had said. The Planning Board was just going by the rules that this board had set up regarding ordinances. So I'm hearing the message that it's okay to create rules and regulations, and then when some request comes up, we just move forward and change it. At least I'm speaking for myself as a planning board member. I voted against it because it was a zoning change, and we were going by the ordinance that this city council made up. And just to comment about Martin's, apparently not everyone knows that tourists stop at Martin's all the time. Canadians stop at Martin's. So right now, that is probably the highlight of this city. So thank you.
Mrs. Weeks, I would agree with you that it is the job of a planning board member to look at these ordinances. And I do, this is where, again, I just want to revert back. Hopefully we'll be working a little bit more hand in hand with you guys going forward to actually help create some of that vision. Because without a vision, it's kind of hard to make decisions, and you got to go by the information you got.
Well, I do agree with Mr. Thomas, what you said tonight, about having a firm plan instead of, changing the plan every other week. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else before we take a vote tonight? Hi, welcome. You bet.
My name is Hannah King. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Drummond Woodsum, and I'm here on behalf of Remington Street Properties that has a purchase and sale to purchase the property at 475 Kennedy Memorial Boulevard, and also Sweet Dirt, who is the intended tenant. I wanted to say that I appreciate that the majority...
Ma'am, I guess I'm getting, could you maybe grab the mic?
Yeah, of course.
I apologize.
Is that better?
People behind you can't hear you, that's why.
That's okay.
Yeah, great, thank you.
I'm tall with my heels on tonight.
Right.
I appreciate that the majority of council members recognize that this really is just a plain vanilla request to rezone property from the commercial A zone to its original zoning of commercial C, and to make this property consistent with all of the zoning surrounding it. Anytime someone comes to you and asks for a rezone, it's because they're not allowed to engage in the use that that particular zone allows for. So just because the marijuana ordinance says marijuana is not an allowed use within this particular zone, what the committee was looking at was what areas of the town is this a suitable use? And clearly there was a decision by this committee that the commercial C zone, the area completely surrounding this property, is an appropriate area of town for these uses for a retail marijuana store. And in addition to that, when this particular piece of property was rezoned from commercial C to commercial A, the decision wasn't, this property isn't consistent with the other uses. We're not changing it because this is different from its neighbors. We're changing it because there's a particular request from the landowner to be able to expand in a way they wouldn't ordinarily be able to. And so we really would encourage you to look at this as you would any other request to rezone, and to focus on whether or not the rezoning would be consistent with the surrounding zones. So thank you all for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else? right, with that, we'll move it to a vote. All counselors in favor? All opposed? Did you catch that, Patty?
I didn't catch any of that. Is that 6 to 1?
It was 6 to 1. 5 to 1. Whoa. That's right, we're down one. We're down one.
Right, 5 to 1. Okay.
And by the way, I just want to thank everybody for the respectful and thoughtful nature of that discussion. We don't always get that in some of these more heated issues, and it's very refreshing and nice to see, so thank you. Moving on to Ordinance 164, 2019.
An ordinance providing for amendment to marijuana ordinance, being enacted by the Waterville City Council acting as the municipal officers, that the marijuana ordinance be amended by the addition of a new article, Article 6, permit limitation as follows. Marijuana store permits for adult use shall be limited to no more than 3 total within all permitted zones in the city.
Move to adopt.
Second.
I'll take the discussion on this to start. I actually asked for this to be on here because of the previous discussion that we just had with the zoning. And as we heard as part of a lot of that discussion, there was a lot of people, when the zoning issue came up a week ago, there was a massive amount of community discussion on our marijuana ordinance that nobody really talked about that much when we actually passed it. But I think sometimes when these things come up in real life, it makes people stop and think about it. So I wanted to separate the two issues. And one of the things that I found through a lot of discussion is that there were some folks on one side who felt like that the city has no right to determine its own planning, to determine its own zoning and how we would like the city to be set up. And that we should just really not have any kind of zoning ordinances or laws. There was another side that treats marijuana much more seriously and would have 0 marijuana businesses in the city of Waterville. But what I found was the majority of people were somewhere actually in the middle on that. And one of the concerns I had that I continued to hear was really, I didn't hear anything on the medical side, but I did hear a concern about the number of recreational marijuana establishments that we would have in the city. How many should we have? How many? Where do they go? The discussion was renewed. I asked for this to be on here tonight so we could have that discussion and hear from the council and realize that these policies can be evolving things as we go forward, and it sometimes doesn't hurt to be precautious on the front end because it's a lot harder to reel things back than it is to slowly trickle them out. Any discussion from the council? Councilor Coelho. Councilor Coelho, I recognize you.
So we've had earlier discussions. I know that we say that liquor and marijuana are not the same thing. Liquor's been around for millennia, and so is pot, but not the same way. So I did a little bit of research on my own, and I'd like to look at, for myself, marijuana, which is adult use, and alcohol, which is also adult use. Different substances. Essentially, we take them to get high. I mean, you get drunk, you get high. So in our city alone, we have 69 licensed places that serve or sell alcohol. Of those 69, 25 are carry out, meaning you can buy beer and bring it home, wine, and other places you can buy spirits and bring them home. Our marijuana shops don't allow you to, and this is a question I heard actually from one of our school board members, where they thought that people were going to be able to consume on premise. That is not the case. We do not have on premise. You will buy it and bring it home. So I caution, I mean, the libertarian in me is screaming when we say 3, we're limiting anything when it comes to business like that. I feel like the market will dictate how many we can sustain. I also want us to think about other stuff, and we discussed it earlier, that there are proposals in the House of Representatives. I got to talk to some of our state reps, Bruce White being one of them, a great resource for me, that showed that LD 335, which passed, but now back to the Appropriations Committee and amended, and hopefully back on the agenda for January, will sort of send 12% of the tax revenue that we create in our municipality back to us, similar to revenue sharing. So I caution that when we look at limiting the number of shops, I mean, let's say we only have 3. Winslow decides that we're going to have more. Maybe they have better customer service in Winslow than we're going to have in Waterville. I don't want to lose any ability to get some tax revenue back to our city. And again, revenue sharing doesn't always show up the way it's supposed to. But that's another piece that I want everyone to look at overall. That's it.
I would remind the counselor that ordinances can change every 2 months if you need them to. So I certainly have zero faith in our elected representatives, not the particular ones in this room, but elected representatives in Augusta who always tell us they're going to be sending more money to municipalities and they're going to be doing all these things. It doesn't really happen for one reason or another, I think. And I hear it from both parties, depending on who it's politically advantageous for to tout it at the time. It doesn't usually get passed. Could always expand on that. But I also think that there are people in the community who, and our job is to represent and find compromise for the general population of the community, not people necessarily on one side or the other. I would simply say that this could continue to be an evolving thing, whether 3 is the number, whether there's more number. Coincidentally, we actually do limit every kind of business via zoning. That's what zoning is. So people say, well, you don't limit any other businesses. Actually, there's a pretty limited space in the city that you can have a gas station, for example, or a Walmart. I'm just putting it out there that I wouldn't count on future revenues, but that can always be amended down the road. Yeah, Councilor.
Yeah, this is an issue that can go either way. We didn't, as a committee, we didn't put a cap on what would we have for how many retail shops that we would have in the city of Waterville. The general discussion was mostly that the market would take care of itself. Certainly, and there was a lot of discussion back and forth about that. I firmly believe that Waterville being a 13 square mile radius and in the ethics of competition and me being a businessman, several people here are business people, we can certainly understand that, for instance, we got a McDonald's on KMD, we have one on Main Street. City of Waterville could not have a third McDonald's. It would shut the doors because it would draw from the other 2. These are realities of business and sustainability that are ever present. So in that essence, I was in the beginning for limiting and putting a cap on this, but the more that I studied the issue, the more I went back to the committee discussions, the more we had open debate. And again, I'm very, I want to make sure that, I was on the marijuana committee for a reason. With several other prominent people, including Winifred Tate, that has just resigned as of recently, but she would as well. We were big advocates for the market share would determine that. And I really believe in us being the 5th smallest city in the state of Maine, that we're not going to have a locust horde of retail pot shops coming down in a 13 square mile radius because they're only going to draw from each other. And you create weaknesses of their own. So the marketability is definitely the biggest thing that I see as being the deterrent for having dozens of retail pot establishments. I think, again, in the essence of all this, that it would be determined through the market.
Anybody else in the council? Councilor Thomas?
I guess I would just say, we discussed this today, I'm not necessarily opposed to putting a limit on the number of businesses. I think 3 is probably too small a number.
We don't usually negotiate down, so I have to start somewhere.
I don't know that we're necessarily there yet, but we do also have to be cautious because, as the mayor said, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle once it's out. It's much easier to put a limit and then increase the number later on than it is to, I mean, obviously anyone who opens a business now would be grandfathered in if we were to put a limit in later on. But it's not that unusual. There are certainly plenty of towns that put a limit, for example, in the number of liquor licenses that they issue, and those things become a commodity amongst those businesses.
Hollowell actually did.
Hollowell did it with marijuana businesses. I mean, I think this is an issue. It's probably going to be important for the committee to stay active because we're going to have to react pretty quickly. As it's one thing to talk about all these things in theory, it's another thing once these stores actually start opening. And we're going to have to be able to be quick to react to things, unintended consequences that are probably going to come along. But at this time, I would say I'm not in favor of putting a limit on the number of facilities.
Councilor?
Yeah, and a great discussion today. I just want to, praise everybody for the civil discussion we've had. It's good and refreshing to see that. Oh, this is a very question that I asked when we were reviewing the ordinance. I asked this question to see if we were going to put a limit, and pretty much the response was unanimous that the market will take care of itself. Because myself, when I was reviewing it and looking at other ordinances like Colorado, and there's some states that have limitations on how many stores you can have. And hearing the argument from everyone, it looks like, the market definitely would be the driver of how many stores we could have in the city. And staying active, like Councilor mentioned, is with watching the market and making sure that we're always ahead of it in terms of how many licenses and how many pot stores we allow within the city is something that we have to keep current. So I really believe that at this time, the best thing for us that could change down the road is to not put limitations and see how things go as they evolve and adapt as we move forward.
I've talked to Councilor Morris a little bit about this. I think, Nick, we sort of touched on this earlier. I also think that our fee structure is very low. I mean, if you look at cities like Portland, the entry level, I think we discussed is what, 20 grand?
10, yeah, I think
It's
10.
$10,000?
For retail.
For retail?
Yeah.
I think some of that will weed out the kid that's got $1,500 in his pocket and wants to open up a shack. But it's limiting the number itself, I'm not for, but I would like to see us revisit our ordinance and change our fee structure.
Would you be willing to vote on something like that at the next meeting? And the reason I ask is because, our job is to respond to the majority of our constituents, and there's people on both sides, and then there's a lot of people in the middle, and there's a lot, like it or not, there's a lot of people who don't want recreational facilities so I think some kind of compromise should be in order to help facilitate that. Whether it's this or whether it's that, if you're telling me that is something you would vote on, I would like to work with you over the next 2 weeks to get that on our next agenda. Yeah.
And actually, I would agree with Councilor Coyle because that is actually something that I looked at. And there are some different things that we can do as a city to be able to capture and limit the number of stores, because there are plenty of cities who are actually charging different types of fees that are directly paid to the city. I think it was up to 3% of the total revenue of the stores. And there's definitely something that we need to do about that, because it looks like there's going to be a lot of revenue that's going to be coming through those doors. So if there's going to be revenue, we have to find a way to be able to capture that revenue at the same time, keeping, make sure that we don't let ourselves be invaded by, pot shops as well.
And I want to be clear, this isn't to stigmatize this isn't to stigmatize marijuana shops, but we do have, there is a reality. We do have issues with people under the age of 18 with heavy use of marijuana. These are realities, and I'm not blaming the shop owners. I'm blaming, that's frankly, it's parental responsibility. But there are issues that, just like with alcohol, when you start dealing with any substance that alters your mind, there are a whole host of issues that have to be taken into consideration, and communities have to decide how they want to shape their community around those issues. And they're important discussions, and I actually appreciate that we're actually having a real discussion about it. Yes.
I know, as being part of the marijuana committee, that we studied fee structure, and we looked at the variable thing, and we wanted to be comparable with other towns and municipalities as far as that fee structure was concerned. I think we matched Fairfield, if I'm not mistaken, for the fee structure. We went on that as a basis for structuring those fees. We didn't want, at the time of the discussion, we wanted to be comparable so that we could be inviting to business entrepreneurship in these kinds of facilities to come in and generate the revenue that we expected it to, and I still expect it to generate a handsome amount of revenue for the city of Waterville down the line as this thing ever evolves. I would say that I am open to looking at that fee schedule again in accordance with, like we were talking about, not necessarily cap how many retail stores are, but I would be very open to re-looking at that fee schedule. I do believe that we can charge a little bit extra because of the fact that we are the service center of many outlying towns in this region, and certainly we could be a little bit more expensive than our neighbors. And I still think that we would get those business entrepreneurships even for a little bit extra. I do think that is a comparable compromise.
I would recommend that we just hear in the conversation that we vote to table this indefinitely and actually come back with something very different.
Yeah, you're going to take comments from the public?
Well, if we are going to vote on it, yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's a terrible idea to table it, and I think that.
Well, tabling indefinitely kills it. It means we're not going to actually vote on this. We would come back and we're going to look at the fee structures and come back with something.
I'd love to see it get killed, because we made a decision on this committee to not limit it and let the market decide.
Right.
It's that simple. I can't believe that, I'm a registered Democrat here talking about the free market deciding things. Mr. Republican talking about trying to limit free enterprise. You gotta be kidding me. The reason we structured it the way we did was so big outside interests wouldn't come in and take over, and it would allow everyone to have a level playing field. You're not talking about limiting how many bars are in town. You're not talking about limiting how many hotels are in town. This is only because there's some political pressure apparently being put upon certain individuals to make this into a huge issue. And it should not be a huge issue. It sounds to me like everyone on the committee disagrees with this, or everyone on the city council disagrees with this. So why in the world would we table it? Kill it now.
Okay, so a couple of things, Mr. Ferris. Asking the council to table indefinitely actually does kill it. And I was responding to the council's suggestion that we look at different things like raising the fees and things like that. And believe it or not, we actually can and should continue to discuss our policies, and policies do change. So just because excuse me, you're done. Just because that committee determined a certain fee structure, we can change that. But excuse me, sir, you are out of order. You are out of order. Sit down. You are not going to, your speaking time is done. Our job is to respond to a constituency, and when there's a question about the number, I am comfortable suggesting something like this to actually create a conversation, because the point was to separate it from the zoning issue, first of all, and to actually talk about the marijuana issue, because that really was what a lot of the issue was. It sounds like this council actually agrees in limiting these businesses in some way, just using different means to do that. However, asking them to table indefinitely actually does kill it, because that way it gives us time to meet over the next couple of weeks and come back with something very different that doesn't have it set up in the structure.
May I ask one question then?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Who decides, under this idea to limit it to 3, who makes the decision on who gets those licenses?
First come, first serve.
I guess it would be a first come, first serve.
But
again, we
as far
have
as I'm concerned at this point,
the discussion.
we're killing it.
We're
We're not
killing.
limiting
We're
any-
making a
And
motion.
we,
to
we- and
table.
we will be, yes. Can I get a motion to table indefinitely?
I make a motion to table indefinitely.
And second.
All in favor? Here we go. Counselor updates. Yeah.
Oh, you go ahead.
Sure.
You go ahead.
I want to bring to light, last week, I had the privilege and honor of attending the 911 ceremony down at the Riverwalk at the head of Falls, a ceremony that was organized, orchestrated, and put together by Bob Veer and his associates. I will make it very clear, Bob, that your associates deserve equal, as you have said many times, deserve equal and positive commendation, because you certainly are a person that has a lot of organization abilities, and people are just drawn to the cause. And certainly the 911 ceremony was absolutely, I was amazed at the local response, and it was interesting, because as the ceremony was in its right in its prime, I made an observation, and I want to commend the mayor for his Nick Isgrove for his amazing speech that was laced with a lot of overtures to, we need to look at our maker as these tragedies unfold, because without his blessing, you know, nothing could be remembered, nothing could be made of the fact of how very severe and how deep the wounds are for the evil mongers that have done this to us as a nation. And I think every municipality, every township, every major city, every state is in cohesion together and condemning this attack that happened. And just a local flavor of what I saw at this ceremony was just amazing. As we were, and I want to commend also, you know, Representative Colleen Madigan for speaking at that event as well. Bob Veer made many, many oratic, overtures to the nation and to the state and the city also. I was also very pleased to see men of the cloth there, and fathers and priests. And I was just really amazed and overwhelmed by, you know, the Waterville Fire Department, the Delta Ambulance, and the other ones that partook in this. And it was a very somber and realistic ceremony. But as I was observing, as we were going into prayer, something funny happened I don't think anybody else noticed in the background. Absolutely amazing. Where the retaining wall is on the other side of the Riverwalk, there was probably 50, 60 seagulls that suddenly descended down and nestled. And you know how long, you know, the 900-foot Riverwalk is. They didn't go down the other end. They didn't go in the middle. They were right behind that retaining wall, listening and just being a symbol of prayer. This is something that really touched my heart and really touched me when we were talking about understanding what the blessings of our Almighty are. And certainly he even had nature there, was in attendance, and I was just amazed at that point. I wanted to point that out. And thank you, Bob, and all members that were there. And certainly, you know, the homage to this ceremony, I just want to make sure that that was recognized.
Counselor?
So I just wanted to make a statement about a situation that happened to one of my constituents in Ward 2. So 2 weeks ago, Kristen Price, a resident of Ward 2, came and spoke at the city council. This was not the first time she had the courage to come and exercise her right as a constituent during community note and other matters. Because of that, I'm here today to tell you that I am disturbed by what she shared with me regarding what transpired afterwards, because she spoke at city council meeting. Because of her speech and concern, she has been called despicable names by folks I don't believe ever met her or ever had a conversation with her. names I wouldn't wish on anyone. Today, I want to say to anyone listening that I, as a city councilor, don't stand for the bullying, intimidation, or the name calling of constituents who come to speak here during community notes or any kind of matters. No constituent should ever feel like they can't come to the city council and respectfully, again, the key word here is respectfully, speak to city officials. I am disturbed by the behavior exhibited toward this constituent, and quite frankly, anyone who ever had been attacked for coming to speak here. To that effect, I want to publicly let her know, and anyone who ever thought about speaking during council meetings, that I, and I know many others here on this council, support their right to come here and voice their concern, regardless of if I or anyone for that matter agrees with them or not. Thank you.
Any other councilor updates? Next is Community Notes. Community Notes is a time where if anybody has something they would like to speak about or mention that was not discussed on tonight's agenda, now would be the time to do it. We ask that you come to the podium, tell us your name, where you live, and take a couple of minutes to tell us what you have to say.
Wtvl Ward 7. I want to thank Mayor Nick Isgrove for his eloquent speech, Councilor Sidney Mayu for the kind words. I also would like to thank my team, Sean Karen, who videographed the entire event. And it couldn't have been done, without Fire Chief Easler, who lost one of his brothers so tragically up in Farmington. I also want to thank Parks and Rec Director Matt Skian for allowing us. I had to fill out a permit. He had it all filled out. See you later, Bob. Made it a lot easier. 9/11/2001 happened 18 years ago. And as Councilor Mayu stated, I did notice those seagulls in the back of me. And it was God that was responding. May we never forget September 11th, 2001. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Anybody else for Community Notes? Guess it's ladies first.
Hi, Jennifer Bergeron from Winslow, but I have an interest in the downtown, owning a business downtown, and am interested in the parking situation and would like to know when that's going to be discussed here, because there was a meeting regarding regarding parking downtown held last Tuesday, I believe, and it was traffic and parking and a little concerning to many people. So I would love to know what's happening, how people get involved in the discussion.
I can answer that for you, Jennifer, in accordance with Mike. I know that that issue with the 5 options that was mentioned before.
I think she's talking about Main Street.
I'm talking about both, because I definitely...
I know that we've talked a little bit off and then, but we also know that there's a parking committee meeting happening either at the end of this month or the beginning of next month. To my knowledge, we are anticipating that happening, where those options will be discussed, and obviously whittle it down to the one that the committee is going to recommend to the council.
No date set.
No date yet, but still, that's what we're meeting about as one of the topics.
Yeah, and it's a great that you brought that up, because actually today somebody approached me about a parking situation, the one at the Head of Falls, and it appears that there are a lot of vehicles down there with out-of-state plates. It started to get a little crowded.
That's where we asked them to park.
Yeah, and some people are looking at it and saying, hey, now, now, there's people are asking questions as far as, are we going to have enough parking even for ourselves? So, I mean, there's some discussions items to be had there. So that's something that's going to happen with the parking committee, and I would like definitely to be able to hopefully join that if possible.
And we didn't even get to the concourse question at that meeting last Tuesday, so that's
Right.
Obviously an important piece of all that.
Well, and I don't know how many people in the public realize that the traffic situation right now prevents you from going from Main Street to Winslow. So if you are traveling down Main Street, you cannot, with the new traffic pattern, turn left and go to Winslow. I think if more people knew that, more people would be very concerned. I'm concerned. I know, living in Winslow and owning a business downtown, I'm thinking, how many people have we just told that live in Winslow, you know what, we really don't care how you get home. Just go in circles in this
Actually,
town.
no, I think that we're making Front Street,
Yeah.
rather.
I understand, but if you're going down, anyway, I won't get into the details of it, but there are definitely ways where if you're traveling down Main Street, you can't, there's a certain point, you can't opt out
Right.
and get onto Front Street. So,
I will not pretend traffic engineering is my expertise.
and
but-
nor is it mine, but it is somebody's, and somebody should be looking
Indeed.
at it again, because the solution they've come up with hasn't, there's no way that works.
Downtown Waterville is going to be like the Hotel California, Jennifer.
it.
You can check out, but you cannot leave.
Which is great, because I have a place they can come and just hang out indefinitely, so. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Julian Payne, Ward 5. Just a point of clarification with Jay Coelho. They will associate us together, being as we're from the same ward. So please clarify that I was not the school board member that asked if I could drive to the shop, get stoned, and then drive away afterwards. Okay.
You were not that school board member.
Okay,
I'm not going to mention who it was.
Yeah,
but what-
thank you.
Is there anybody else for community notes?
Just want to thank Phil for his speech on bullying, people speaking against people for speaking out. I look as the counselors as leaders of the city. Leaders should lead. They should lead by example. And there was a speech tonight given by one of the counselors on Ordinance 163 that was putting down the public and board members for speaking freely. That is not leading by example. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for community notes? Mike, we'll move to manager's report.
I'm good.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
No way.